Hey Upper East Siders and my lovely glow-getters. Welcome back to my channel. Today we arrive at day 8 of this high-profile case, and the courtroom drama shows no signs of slowing. In the previous sessions, we heard emotional testimony from Combs's former partner, Cassie, Cassandra Ventura, and other insiders, painting a disturbing picture of alleged sex trafficking and abuse. Now, on day 8, new evidence came to light and several key witnesses took the stand, including an expert psychologist, a former personal assistant, and even a famous rapper, each contributing important pieces to the unfolding story. Let's delve into the events of day 8 in chronological order, maintaining the formal yet engaging tone of this documentary series. New evidence from a federal agent. To start day 8, the trial revisited the testimony of a Homeland Security Special Agent, Agent Jared Gaynor, whose evidence from the previous day set the stage for more revelations today. Agent Gaynor had led a raid on Combs's Miami residence in March 2024, and his testimony resumed with a detailed presentation of what investigators found. Jurors were shown new photographic evidence of items seized during the raid on Combs' property. The images revealed a trove of startling contents. 2 AR-15 rifles, disassembled and unloaded, hidden in a closet, other firearms components and ammunition, stacks of cash, and an array of personal items that raised eyebrows in court. Notably, agents uncovered several pairs of towering platform high-heel shoes and large bottles of sexual lubricant and baby oil among Combs' belongings. These seemingly innocuous objects took on a more sinister significance given earlier testimony. As we'll recall, Cassie had described how such items were used in what she termed Combs' private freak-off parties. The photographic evidence served to corroborate those accounts, suggesting that the extravagant heels and baby oil Cassie spoke of were in fact present in Combs' home. The prosecution emphasized this point, underscoring how closely the seized items matched the details of Cassie's story about the alleged sex rituals. According to the agent, the raid was a massive operation involving roughly 80 to 90 federal agents swarming Combs' luxury estate to execute the search warrant. The court heard how agents methodically combed through the property, eventually cataloging the weapons, drugs, and other evidence now on display. Prosecutors used Agent Gaynor's testimony to paint a picture of Combs' lifestyle and the tools of control he allegedly kept at hand. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as jurors absorbed images of high-powered rifles and explicit paraphernalia, reinforcing the prosecution's narrative of an empire built on intimidation and exploitation. Under cross-examination, Combs' defense team sought to downplay the implications of these finds. One of Combs' attorneys pressed Agent Gaynor on the condition of the firearms, getting him to acknowledge that the 2 AR-15 rifles were dismantled and not loaded when confiscated. This pointed detail was meant to suggest that those guns were not readily usable weapons. Perhaps they were collector's pieces or stored away without malicious intent. The defense also hinted that possession of cash or personal items like baby oil is not a crime in itself. Still, the prosecution countered that even if not illegal on their own, these items gain a chilling relevance when viewed in context. Jurors were reminded that multiple witnesses have described Combs brandishing firearms to threaten others, and that Cassie and others recounted how the baby oil and shoes were used to facilitate sexual abuse. Seeing the physical evidence with their own eyes appeared to make a strong impression on the jury. Agent Gaynor's testimony concluded with a clear takeaway. The material evidence retrieved from Combs' home powerfully bolstered the allegations of weapons, drugs, and tools of abuse underpinning the case. The psychologist's powerful testimony. After the evidence presentation, the prosecution next called an expert witness to help the jury understand the psychological dynamics of the alleged abuse. Dr. Dawn Hughes, a forensic psychologist specializing in trauma, took the stand and delivered what many observers described as powerful, eye-opening testimony. Dr. Hughes did not examine Cassie or any specific victim in this case. Instead, she testified in general terms about the patterns of behavior and mental effects seen in victims of prolonged abuse and sex trafficking. No victim wants to be abused, Dr. Hughes explained firmly, but they often stay in the relationship because they feel trapped. She outlined how abusers like the one described in this trial can exert total control, not only through physical violence, but through emotional manipulation, isolation, and threats, creating a situation where victims believe they have no no safe way out. It is very common, she noted, for a victim to remain with an abusive partner, not due to indifference to the abuse, but due to fear, psychological dependence, and hope that things might improve. The psychologist introduced the concept of a trauma bond, describing how an abuser alternates terror with affection to confuse and confine their victim. Over time, the victim may become emotionally bonded to their abuser in a way that outsiders find hard to understand. Dr. Hughes's explanations provided crucial context for the jury, helping to make sense of why someone like Cassie might endure 11 years of alleged mistreatment by Combs. We were reminded of Cassie's own testimony from earlier in the trial. She had tearfully recounted feeling like a hostage in her relationship with Combs, afraid to leave. Now, the psychologist's expert insight reinforced that Cassie's experience was consistent with known patterns of coercive control. Dr. Hughes also described various coping mechanisms that abuse victims employ to survive day-to-day trauma. For instance, she spoke about passive self-defense, behaviors where a victim tries to minimize harm by not resisting or provoking the abuser. One vivid example she gave was curling up into a ball during a physical attack, making oneself small and non-threatening. This detail struck a chord in the courtroom as it mirrored earlier witness accounts. In previous testimony, two of Cassie's acquaintances had described seeing Cassie drop into a fetal position on the floor while Combs was beating her. Dr. Hughes pointed out that such behavior is a textbook survival response for someone enduring repeated assaults. Additionally, the psychologist drew a link between trauma and substance abuse. Victims of sexual abuse and trafficking, she explained, often turn to drugs or alcohol as a way to numb their emotional pain or dissociate from the horrific experiences. The jury was reminded that Cassie herself had testified to this very pattern. She admitted that during the so-called freak-off parties orchestrated by Combs, she would use drugs, including cocaine and pills, to numb herself, and eventually developed a serious addiction to opioids. By highlighting these coping strategies, Dr. Hughes gave the jurors a framework to interpret the behaviors we've heard about from Cassie and other alleged victims. Far from being signs of consent or complicity, actions like staying silent, withdrawing, or self-medicating with drugs can actually be symptoms of deep trauma. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to undermine Dr. Hughes's testimony by portraying it as too broad and not directly tied to Sean Combs or the specific facts of this case. Defense attorney Jonathan Bach pressed Dr. Hughes on the limitations of her evaluation, emphasizing that she never interviewed Cassie or any other witness in this trial personally. You can't diagnose somebody without hearing what they have to say, correct? The lawyer asked. Dr. Hughes acknowledged that she did not perform a personal evaluation here. She was offering general expert knowledge about abuse victims. The defense also raised the concept of malingering, fabricating, or exaggerating symptoms for ulterior motives, implying that it's possible for someone to fake psychological trauma. Dr. Hughes calmly agreed that, in theory, people can pretend to have emotional symptoms. However, she did not waver from her core opinions about abuse dynamics. On redirect questioning by the prosecution, Dr. Hughes made it clear that her insights were meant to give context, not a clinical diagnosis of any individual. The prosecutor also rehabilitated her credibility by revealing that Dr. Hughes's expertise is respected on both sides of the courtroom. In fact, one of Sean Combs' own defense attorneys had hired Dr. Hughes in a past case, a telling detail that surely did not escape the jury's notice. Despite the defense's efforts to cast doubt, Dr. Hughes's testimony ended on a strong note. Her professional insights appeared to resonate in the courtroom, lending psychological weight to the prosecution's portrayal of Combs as a manipulative predator and helping jurors understand the often invisible chains that keep victims in abusive situations. An ex-assistant reveals the inside story. Following the psychologist's testimony, the trial moved on to a first-hand witness from Combs' inner circle. In the afternoon of day 8, George Kaplan, a former personal assistant to Sean Combs, took the stand under subpoena. Before Kaplan began, the court addressed a significant procedural matter. During the lunch break, the judge granted Kaplan immunity from prosecution for any crimes he might confess to on the stand. This was a crucial development, as Kaplan's lawyer had indicated that without immunity, the ex-employee would invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and refuse to answer certain questions. Now, with an immunity order in place, Kaplan was compelled to testify fully and honestly about what he witnessed while working for Combs, no longer fearing that his words could be used to charge him later. Once sworn in, George Kaplan provided a rare glimpse behind the curtain of Combs's lifestyle. Speaking in a cautious but candid manner, he described his role as a personal assistant entrusted with handling some of Combs's most private and troubling arrangements. Kaplan testified that one of his duties was to prepare hotel suites for Combs's exclusive after parties, gatherings that other witnesses have referred to as freak-offs. According to Kaplan, these weren't ordinary parties, they were secretive late-night encounters involving multiple young women, and his job was to ensure everything was in place to facilitate Combs's demands. He told the jury that before Combs arrived at a venue with his entourage, Kaplan would be dispatched to set up the room to Combs's exact specifications. This preparation included stocking large quantities of drugs, such as cocaine and other illicit substances, for Combs and his guests to use. He also laid out an assortment of sexual paraphernalia. Kaplan specifically mentioned placing bottles of lubricant, Astroglide, and baby oil within reach, recalling how these items were used during the coarse sexual acts that would follow. Additionally, he ensured that plenty of alcohol was on hand, premium liquor by the case, to keep the atmosphere disinhibited. Listening to this testimony, the jury could not miss how closely these details echoed Cassie's earlier testimony about what transpired during the freak-off nights. Cassie had told the court how Combs would ply her with drugs and make her participate in lurid encounters with hired sex workers, often using baby oil as a tool of humiliation. Now Kaplan, speaking from the perspective of an employee behind the scenes, confirmed the logistical side of those same allegations. Kaplan's insider account grew even more unsettling as he recounted specific incidents of violence and abuse he had witnessed during his tenure with Combs. The former assistant testified that he personally observed Combs commit acts of physical violence on 3 separate occasions. Because of the sensitive nature of his statements, Kaplan's exact descriptions were delivered in a somber tone. While he did not relish revisiting these moments, Kaplan detailed one incident in which he walked in on Combs angrily assaulting a young woman in a hotel room, an episode that left him shaken. On another occasion, he saw Cassie herself immediately after an apparent beating. Her lip was bleeding and her eye was swollen, consistent with having been punched in the face. Indeed, other testimony in this trial, including from a makeup artist, has noted Cassie being found with a busted lip and bruises, which aligns with Kaplan's account here. Each time, Kaplan said he felt powerless to intervene. Combs was not only his boss, but also a hugely influential figure, and confronting him was out of the question. He described the atmosphere within Combs's circle as one of fear and silence. Staff members knew that challenging or reporting Combs's behavior could lead to swift retaliation or the loss of their livelihoods. Kaplan admitted that for a long time, he stayed quiet out of self-preservation, even as he harbored deep guilt about what he saw. His voice quavered slightly as he acknowledged to the jury, "I did things I'm not proud of." This moment humanized the witness. He was a man clearly grappling with regret, now coming forward under oath to tell the truth about Combs's activities. Kaplan's testimony, with its mix of logistical detail and personal remorse, added a compelling insider's confirmation to the prosecution's case. It showed that not only did Combs's alleged abuses occur as described, but even those on his payroll had been disturbed by his behavior. By the time Kaplan stepped down from the stand, the jury had heard a damning narrative of how Combs's wealth and power allowed him to create a private world with its own cruel rules. A world that George Kaplan helped operate until now. Kid Cudi takes the stand. In a stunning turn of events, Day 8 concluded with testimony from a very well-known figure in the music industry, one who until now had been discussed only in third person during the trial. Rapper Kid Cudi, real name Scott Mescudi, appeared as a witness, providing a brief yet dramatic chapter in the day's proceedings. Kid Cudi's name had surfaced earlier in the trial during Cassie's testimony. We recall that Cassie revealed how, after she tried to end her toxic relationship with Combs and began seeing Kid Cudi around 2012, Combs grew enraged with jealousy. According to Cassie's prior statements, Combs explicitly threatened to kill Kid Cudi, going so far as to say, "We're going to blow up his car," in a fit of anger. These allegations hung in the air as one of the more shocking anecdotes in Cassie's story. And now, on Day 8, the trial addressed them head-on by hearing from Kid Cudi himself. Kid Cudi testified about a frightening incident that seemed to confirm Combs's vengeful intent. He told the court that in 2012, while he was dating Cassie, his Porsche car mysteriously exploded in his driveway. The vehicle was set on fire fire in a deliberate act of arson. Fortunately, no one was hurt in the blast, but the message it sent was terrifying. Kid Cudi recounted how stunned and confused he was that day as he looked at the charred wreckage of his sports car. At the time, the cause of the explosion was not publicly determined, but given what Cassie had confided to him about Combs's threats, Cudi immediately feared that this was no random accident. In his testimony, he stopped short of directly accusing Sean Combs of ordering the attack. After all, Cudi did not witness who planted the explosives, but he made it clear that the timing and circumstances strongly suggested Combs's involvement. The courtroom fell silent as the rapper described the mix of fear and anger he felt, realizing someone might have tried to kill or warn him in such a violent fashion. Perhaps the most memorable moment came when Kid Cudi described a face-to-face meeting with Combs that took place after the car fire. At some point following the incident, Combs arranged to meet with Cudi. The specifics of how this meeting came about were not discussed in detail, but it's implied Combs sought him out. Kid Cudi testified that during this encounter, Sean Combs projected an eerie, almost cinematic aura of menace. Cudi remarked that Combs looked like a Marvel supervillain during their meeting, a striking quote that conveys how intimidating and unapologetic Combs appeared to him. The imagery drew the jurors' attention. One could almost picture Combs as a larger-than-life antagonist looming over the young rapper. Kid Cudi did not detail what was said in this confrontation. He may have been constrained from quoting directly, but his description suggested that Combs was gloating or warning him in the wake of the car bombing. The implication of Cudi's testimony was crystal clear. The threat Cassie reported was real, and someone very close to Combs had acted on it in a brutal way. Seeing Kid Cudi, a successful artist in his own right, come before the court to validate this part of Cassie's story was a powerful moment. It demonstrated that Combs's alleged pattern of intimidation extended beyond his immediate circle of employees and girlfriends. Even fellow celebrities could be targets if they crossed him. Observers in the courtroom noted that the jury was riveted during Kid Cudi's account. It's not every day that a famous entertainer testifies in a trial like this, and his presence underscored the far-reaching impact of the case. Kid Cudi's testimony was brief but impactful, reinforcing the narrative that Combs would stop at nothing to punish those he perceived as disloyal or threatening. When the rapper left the stand, the weight of his words hung in the air. For the first time, the court had heard from someone outside the direct victim group who felt the ripple effects of Combs's alleged wrath. It was a dramatic capstone to Day 8's proceedings, leaving everyone in court with much to ponder. Conclusion of Day 8. Day 8 of Puff Diddy's federal trial proved to be one of the most eventful days yet in this unfolding legal saga. We saw hard evidence, guns, money, and personal items that brought earlier accusations to life visually. We heard from an expert who gave us a psychological roadmap to understand the human stories of abuse behind those accusations. We listened to an insider break the code of silence within Combs's camp, confirming the ugly truths that had long been hidden. And in a jaw-dropping finale, a famous musician's testimony linked the defendant to an act of violent retribution beyond the immediate scope of the sex trafficking charges. Each piece of the puzzle, from Agent Gannon's photos to Kid Cudi's recollections, has added new depth to the prosecution's case and created an increasingly stark image of Sean Combs's alleged double life. As the court adjourned on Day 8, the atmosphere was a mix of gravity and anticipation. The revelations of the day raised as many questions as they answered. How will Combs's defense team counter this mounting evidence and testimony? Will there be further witnesses from Combs's inner circle, or perhaps even more high-profile figures, to testify about what they know? The trial is far from over, and it seems each day brings another surprise. Thank you for joining us for this detailed recap of Day 8. This video is part of our ongoing series covering Diddy's trial day by day, and we aim to document every significant moment in this landmark case. Thank you once again for being part of my community, and I look forward to seeing you in our future videos. Until then, stay beautiful, stay natural, and stay you.